You're listening to the Pure Fury Creations Entertainment Network. The views and opinions expressed on this episode are those of the speaker and do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or philosophies of the PFC Entertainment Network or any of the affiliates that make this show possible. This show has also been rated M for mature audiences only.
We don't talk about that.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. It's Shh, we don't talk about that. I'm Joanna, and with us today is
Natalie.
And then we also have our fearless leader, Jason, on the podcast, of course, ready to impart any wisdom as needed.
I'm here when I need to be tagged in, for sure. I'm just here. I'm primarily here to push buttons. That's
Right.
my role here, and I'm okay with
Is
that.
that your role in life generally?
And drink coffee. Or is that coffee?
It most certainly is. My day does not go until I've had a good adequate amount of coffee. I don't mind telling you.
Excellent. Excellent.
It's go-to. You know what I mean? Like, don't even try talking to me until I've had at least one cup in. Then
That's
we'll
fair.
navigate through the day.
That's fair.
One of those people.
I am one of those people, and I have no problem with it.
My
I'm
sister,
okay.
oh my God, my sister's like, no, I need coffee. So much so that her husband, my wonderful brother-in-law, brings her coffee in bed so she can drink it as soon as she wakes up.
That's smart,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
Oh, that's phenomenal. I
Maybe
can
that's-
appreciate that.
Maybe that's when Keith brings me tea in bed.
That's right. So you can start your day off right.
Yeah, when I drink
Okay.
it.
I like it.
Well, what are we here to talk about today, Natalie?
Well, I think we're going to go into a little bit more detail about what big T is versus little t.
Yeah.
Because I think that's super important, especially along the lines of everything we've been talking about. And then trauma and personality disorders and whether they're linked and in what way.
And that kind of brings us to our title, linked train. So it's all aboard the T train, all sizes welcome.
Yes.
And that's, woo woo, because we're going to talk about big T and little t. And so as exciting as I make it sound, neither of those things are exciting or good.
Fair.
However, they do both exist in our lives. And unfortunately for, me, I'm one of those people who's had both of them, but there are people out there who've never had big T, who've only had little t. Little t trauma are things like, not having enough food, not having enough love, not being told that you're loved, just being ignored, not having an adult around to give you that kind of guidance and attention. Those kinds of things can be traumatic, and social media is one of those things too that kind of falls in that little T trauma, because it can be very damaging, right?
Absolutely. 100%.
But it's not something that we think about as being a traumatic place or event.
Yeah.
Yet it's shaping kids' psyches and brains every day.
For sure.
So I think we both thought it was important to touch on that because I think a lot of us, when we think of trauma, we think of, especially PTSD, we think of, well, war is the first one we think of, I think.
Yeah.
And then next to that, we'll think of murder, rape, home invasion, violence, something like that. And while those are huge traumatic events, sexual violence, huge traumatic events, they activate the same places in our brain, if I'm not mistaken, as little t trauma does especially when you're exposed to it enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So you might need like 10 little t traumas to get you to one big T trauma, like the same kind of, okay, I can't take it anymore. Where your mom, maybe you come in, like you gave an example once where you trip and your mom's like, oh my God, you're such a loser or something like that.
Yeah.
And that may not cause you something where it shapes your psyche that first time. But if she does it 5 or 6 or 10 times,
yeah,
then by the end of it, then that was something that happened for me, was being told I was stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember at some point thinking, well, this is an adult telling me this, so it must be true.
Yeah.
And that's what kids do, and then we don't know how to undo that thinking without somebody like you to guide us. So what are your thoughts about big T and little t trauma?
And yeah, just like you said, like a lot of people, especially my clients, when I talk about trauma, like initially, like we're trained a certain way to ask questions, albeit we're all trained very differently. So not everybody asks the same questions the same way.
Therapists.
Yes, therapists.
Not therapists, but
we as behavioral health professionals.
Yes.
So a lot of times I'll ask clients, instead of saying trauma, I'll be like, what are the big events that stick out to you that when you think about them, like your body gives you a visceral reaction? Like It can be as big as a car accident. It can be as small as you being bullied in elementary school for being different.
Right.
Like both are relevant, both are traumatic, although one person will say one's bigger than the other. If you look at how each person is shaped differently, we're all built differently, we all think differently, we all feel differently. Any of those little traumas, because I'll have clients be like I have like little stuff, it's no big deal, it's no big deal. And I'm like, but it is a big deal because you went through all of those, which means your body is telling you had trauma, which is just as relevant as somebody that's been to war, that is a first responder, that has experienced rape or murder or trafficking or home invasions. Like all of it is still the same. It's just people view them differently.
Well, because it still hits the same brain areas, they still light up. Yeah. So to your brain, that was still the worst thing you went through.
Exactly.
You don't have that bigger event to compare it to have that drown out the smaller T's. As someone who grew up with the kind of childhood that I did, I had both big T and little t trauma. And so for me, I was shaped a lot by the big T traumas, but I am very aware of how much that little t burrowed in to my brain and left an indelible mark that I still to this day battle those voices.
Yes.
Battle those stories and assumptions and reactions and the feedback that the bio loop that my brain is in, that it wants to give me of this is what we do to stay safe. And I have to go, no, it doesn't matter that you feel that way. What's the facts? What's the reality? And, and that's where, and a lot of it, this is where we brought up personality disorders, because you have complex trauma and complex PTSD, and those can often look like these personality disorders.
Sure.
When in reality, these symptoms are caused by the trauma that you went through and the way that it reshaped your brain versus you having some kind of personality disorder that is of a greater concern, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. And it's no different than like kids being diagnosed with anxiety instead of ADHD.
Right.
Or bipolar disorder instead of trauma, or depression instead of trauma. Like looking at what has happened, like the chicken before the egg. What has happened to cause this depression? Is it just like your life has been perfect, like you've never had any issues or concerns, and your body doesn't make the chemical that it needs? Great, depression. But if there's traumatic events that have happened in your life that then manifest into depression or anxiety or mood swings, like a lot of people, doctors, medications are provided first. Well, you probably have this. Well, and then once I know I have this, now I'm labeled like I have bipolar. Like it's my excuse for everything. Or I have this. When it's like, wait, hold up. What came first? Did this come first? And then it happened, then stuff happened. Like what came first? Let's work on that, which can then decrease the anxiety, decrease the depression, decrease the mood swings. And now what are you taking medication for?
Right. And for me, like that was one of the things that we went through. That, of course, they threw medication at me at a young age. I think I started in my teens on Paxil or Zoloft or one of those. I think I started on Paxil, but and then I went through the gamut of trying to find the right one. Finally found one I was on for a while. Then got pregnant with my kids. I had to come off. Went through all the side effects. Decided I didn't want to go back on it, and found a way to actually balance my life for a while. But I wasn't doing it in healthy ways. I was surviving as we do, and coping, and then finally got to a point where I went back to therapy, and thankfully I didn't jump right back into medication. I did do therapy first. And, that's condensing my story obviously quite a bit, because I went through where I tried and skipped and fell out. It's not the simple, guys, but I did go back to my therapist, and I was at therapy for a couple of years before we discussed, like, he finally broached the topic with me about, I feel like maybe we should discuss a medication, and he had reasons.
Yes.
By that time, I had been being seen for him for a couple of years. I had done a lot of work and growth on my own, and I was still showing certain symptoms. Once I saw, and one of the great things was that when I got to my primary care, she messed with my medication at first and then didn't feel comfortable after that because of my reaction, and just stopped and said, you know what? I'm going to send you to a psychiatrist. Right. And she did admit, I wish I would have just sent you to begin with, which I agree. It took some finagling, and we finally figured out that was something that I needed as part of my regimen, but not everybody does.
Right.
It's been interesting for me. The Body Keeps the Score was one of those that really brought up a lot of how he feels that people have underlying trauma and underlying events that need to be resolved.
Absolutely.
And they need to be able to heal their anxiety and their unhealthy coping skills and behaviors before they need the medication. But we tend to throw those pills at them as a quick fix.
Yeah, and obviously as a little kid, we're not necessarily able to or have the ability to verbalize what trauma we've had because we're little kids. We don't even understand the word trauma.
Yeah, we use different words. Yeah.
So it's like we don't really, and the doctors aren't asking us as children, like they're asking our parents. So then our parents are giving their version of things, and thus the kids, us, we're not able to say, wait a minute, I've had this big traumatic event, or I keep having these little small events happen, and they've been so repetitive that now they're hurting me, so now I'm depressed because of that. I'm anxious because of that. Now I'm trying to be perfect because of that. Now I'm compulsive because of that. Because kids don't have the ability to say that.
No, they don't have the language or their brains aren't even developed yet.
Right, right.
So, yeah. And we as kids don't understand all of that. We as kids, our ego comes out and we tend to think everything is about us. Everything is because of us. We are the reason for everything. You know, if our parents get divorced, it's because of us. If they're arguing, it's because of us. If they're mad, it's because of us.
Right.
You know, and so that can lead to those little T traumas again, because you're constantly sending that message that you're doing something wrong. There's something wrong with you, when that's not actually what's happening. But it leads into, like I said, I went through quite a long assessment. It took them a while to figure out whether or not it was that I had borderline personality disorder and it was mild, or it was complex trauma and complex PTSD. And it wasn't until I got to it was my own psychiatrist that I found on my own. And she does a lot of holistic medicine, and I liked her approach. She did these different assessments, and that was where we kind of got to the bottom of it. And thankfully we did, because that allowed us to target the work that I was doing in therapy in a different way.
Sure.
So that then I could move past those hurdles that had looked like forever obstacles before.
Yeah.
And we're now something that, it's not that I never have to deal with them. It's not that I never have behavioral issues or I never say anything wrong. I mean, people on the podcast who've listened know that. But I definitely have the ability to correct myself and to admit when I have fault and to see where I am part of the problem instead of making everything about me or everyone else's actions towards me. And then going through that cycle where you continue creating you continue repeating the traumas, honestly.
Yeah.
You know, until you can break out of that cycle from it. And that will happen when you're in when you have these personality disorders too. But so talk to us about those. What about these personality disorders should we know?
Well, like you mentioned, like a lot of times the behaviors and the symptoms from like having complex PTSD or just PTSD in general, they can look like borderline personality disorder. Like there are some similarities in there. You have to have a full assessment. You have to be seeing your therapist and your psychiatrist like consistently enough so they're able to really ascertain whether or not you do indeed have said personality disorder. It's not like you're going to show up session 1 and they're like, oh, I think you're borderline. I think you're histrionic. I think you're antisocial.
And if they do, it's a red flag, right?
Right. Huge, because you're not looking at the totality of the person. Like we need to look at the totality of the person and what the person has been through, and then also looking at the behaviors. Because a lot of times things will mirror other things. Anxious kids potentially become adults that should have been diagnosed as ADHD as kids, but instead they were diagnosed with anxiety. Nothing ever gets better. Or kids are diagnosed with ADHD when they really should have been diagnosed with anxiety. So it's like spend some time with your clients. If you're the parent, obviously, try to give as much unbiased information as you can. Obviously, that can be a little difficult. Take ownership of your behaviors too, because your child is not able to speak up for themselves in a way that they need to because they don't have the words, they don't have the comprehension, they don't have the understanding. But that's what's going to help your kiddo best. 1, quit abusing your damn children. 2, put them in therapy and let them work through things with a play therapist if they're young enough. Through art therapy, finding something that connects in order to better help. Then we don't have a lot of misdiagnoses. I went off on a tangent, so thank you for that, listeners. So as I mentioned, some of the symptoms and behaviors can look exactly the same. What is borderline personality disorder first? So it's a mental health disorder that affects the way people feel about themselves and others, and it makes it difficult for them to function daily. Sounds like a lot of us. Sounds like a lot of us. Underneath it, patterns of unstable and intense relationships, impulsiveness, unhealthy sense of self, extreme emotions, impulsivity, self-interest behavior, the need to have people close while also pushing them away. Could also be a great deal of people are struggling with some of those too. We as professionals do not diagnose anybody with a personality disorder under the age of 18. Primarily, it's best to kind of wait until they're in their mid to late 20s to really truly diagnose. Simply because a lot of these behaviors that kids have can look like said personality disorder, but they tend to grow out of them. So now we don't want to label someone with something that they're going to grow out of. We want to give them the support and help and the therapeutic tools they need so that they can grow out of them in a healthy way. Again, take your kids to therapy. So this borderline can tend to start presenting itself in early adulthood. It absolutely can be treated. Typically the best way to manage is like through talk therapy, definitely DBT. There's some schema focused therapy that's identifying different schemas that show up in people's lives. Mentalization based therapy, which is a little bit different than mindfulness. It's being able to kind of walk through scenarios and looking at scenarios in a way that you've done them before and how can we do them differently. There's a training program, like a systems training for emotional predictability and problem solving. So again, it's almost like a deeper, not necessarily deeper DBT, but like the way DBT is set up. And if you follow it the way that is designed to set up, so the other portion of the emotional predictability and problem solving is breaking things down. Looking at, okay, what is within my control? What is outside of my control? What am I putting onto other people? What am I not putting onto other people? Am I truly in love with this person, or am I just with this person because they provide me with something until now I'm moving on to the next? Like helping you kind of break down and understand your own patterns. And medication. Medication can help. The big, how do I explain it? So a big difference between like trauma and coming from a place of PTSD or even complex PTSD and borderline personality disorder. If I'm ready for therapy and I come from a history of trauma, even though maybe some people have diagnosed me or said that I'm borderline or said that I'm histrionic or said that I'm whatever, I'm actively showing up. I'm actively doing the work. I'm actively applying the skills. Am I getting pissed off at my therapist? Probably. Am I slamming out of their office or closing the laptop? Maybe. But you're still continuing to show up to do the work that you need to do in order to get past it, even when it gets difficult. On the flip side, for individuals that have borderline personality disorder, and not all of them, but a lot of them, it can be very difficult to treat them because once we hit a certain point, a client can tend to lash out. And they lash out with such an intensity that it can definitely sabotage the therapist in such a way that like the therapist can't stop it and can't take it back and can't fix it. This can show up as a client calling our board that governs us and making ethical complaints, going on our web pages and making disparaging views or remarks about like our therapeutic treatment, going on social media platforms and doing the same thing, like calling a therapist's character and their ethics into question. Of course, now this causes a huge conflict because now if you have a client is doing this, I can no longer see you because you then made complaints about me. So now it's caused a conflict of interest. You have thus successfully sabotaged your treatment from going forward. So then now you're taking a step back. I don't need it. I don't need it. I don't need it. So you do it again, and then again, and then again, and then again. So that can cause a big ruffle in the treatment process and the treatment goals and the progression of how one can heal. Not to say that somebody else can't call our ethics into question or can't complain about us on social media, because they absolutely can. But this is in more of a vindictive, I don't like what you're saying. I'm refusing to believe what you're saying. Therefore, I'm going to take everything out on you.
Right. I don't like what you're saying about me in session.
Yes.
About what we've talked about in session. And so I'm going to now I'm going to make you pay.
Yes. Yeah. Because I'm not going to take accountability. So I'm going to make sure that you have to take accountability.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Well, it does, especially coming from somebody who, like I said, they originally talked about, like, does she have borderline personality disorder? And now, having gone through the process, I was absolutely able to, as somebody who had trauma, go in there and be like, let's do the work. I don't like this, but we're going to do it. And, sometimes be like, I don't like you today, Dave, just so you know. He's a pastor, so I never really, like, flipped him off or swore at him or stormed out of there or anything. But I remember that there was one time he said something to me, and I didn't like that, and I kind of responded a little like, But other than that, I would definitely. I usually use humor with it, but I would call him out, and not call him out, but let him know, like, I don't appreciate that, even though I knew he was right.
Right.
That is something that I think is common with anybody going through the healing process. Sometimes you just don't like what you're hearing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I think that was an important thing for me to hear, knowing that we were trying to differentiate, was when he said, Joanna, you'd already fired me. If you had borderline personality disorder, you'd already fired me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's that I hate don't leave me situation.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Like, come closer, get away from me. Love me, but not like that. Yeah.
And then once you do have someone, like, learn to love you the way that you want them to, then you're still pushing them away. Like, okay, no, not like that. Okay, not like that. So it's a constant push and pull relationship with anybody that they get involved with.
Yep.
Some of the differences. So under like the trauma category, the PTSD category, intrusive thoughts, you have avoidance behaviors, you have an increased arousal. So, like, you're always kind of on edge, like on that edge of fight or flight all the time. Negative self-view, difficulty in personal relationships, loss of a belief system, and functional dysregulation, or not functional, Jiminy Christmas, emotional dysregulation. So again,
talk about me.
Some of those can also fall under borderline personality disorder.
Right.
Some of the the differences that they have, like, they view the world in extremes. Like, there's either black or there's white. There is no other way. Quickly changes their values or their worldviews. Like, they can be completely on board with everything that the conservatives are showcasing. And then as soon as somebody says, well, yeah, I totally agree with that. I was just kidding. I don't agree with that. I'm over here with the liberals. Okay, no, I totally believe and have my faith in Jesus. Nope, I totally don't. Like, he can't exist. Like, I believe and have my faith in Satan. Like, extreme differences. Difficulty in impulse control. So a lot of acting out behaviors without thinking through any of them. And again, it's not my fault. It's somebody else's fault.
Right. They make
intense fear of abandonment, which a lot of people with trauma also have. Inappropriate anger, chronic sense of emptiness, and disassociation. Again, with disassociations, a lot of people that have had significant sexual trauma occur, and not just sexual trauma, but that's really the only area that I've ever seen it happen. I would assume with traffickers, kids that are human trafficked or adults that are human trafficked as well, like that abuse, kids that are kept in cages, things of that nature, where you have to shut your mind and your body off to whatever's taking place inside of you, and you go someplace else because you cannot exist in that place anymore. Or even if it's the very first time, it just completely shuts you down. Again, can definitely happen with trauma, can definitely happen with borderline personality disorder. But they can tend to disassociate a lot more for a lot more for many different reasons. So we're looking at like the bubble of PTSD, and we're looking at the bubble of borderline and the different traits. And then there's the similarities, like a Venn diagram, there's a similarity. Both can have trauma, both have changes in mood, both can experience depression, both can experience suicidal thoughts, both can have a pattern of self-destructive behavior. And it's not like the end-all be-all list by any means, but like an example of how they cross over to where someone can say, or a professional can say, I'm not really sure, so let me see. And by gathering like the history, by gently poking the stick in the holes. Someone with trauma is going to respond more to, of course, they might get angry, they might get depressed, they might get sad. But if they're there to do the work, they're going to continue to do the work. They're going to let the stick kind of keep poking them.
Yep.
On the other side of the spectrum, they're not. As soon as you start poking that stick, now I'm retaliating against you with such a lack of impulsivity that, like, I don't care. I need to burn the world down because this cannot be my problem. This cannot be about me. I could not have made these choices.
This is
so
God's
again,
fault.
Yes. So it takes a lot of time looking at those two pieces. And not to say, like, trauma can 100% be a factor in many personality disorders. But trauma does not have to also exist in order for personality disorder to exist. So you can have a perfect, ideal childhood upbringing, no big T, no little t, none of it, and still have a personality disorder.
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
For a lot of them, trauma can absolutely be involved, but it's not the end all be all. Like, trying to think if someone, for example, off the top of my head, I'm going to use what little knowledge I know about Donald Trump. I'm sure he had some sort of trauma in his life. Maybe he didn't. But as the world views him, like he grew up a certain way with his parents and his family, like everything's seemingly okay. Like I would imagine that everybody goes and does all the digging in the background checks, and the Secret Service does all the magic in order to make sure a president is going to be okay to be a president. So it seemingly looks like he had, I'm sure it was difficult at times, but how he built himself up to be where he's at. It doesn't negate that he also probably, if someone were to sit down and actually evaluate him, that he also has a narcissistic personality disorder.
Right.
Or like, yeah, so I'm just going to leave it there with that. Because then I was going to go on to my other thing, but I'm going to give that a moment. So again, growing up, let's assume no major traumas. Let's assume not even some minor traumas. But by all accounts, everybody that has gained as much information as they can about him have said, most likely, if he were to sit down with a professional and truly go through the screening process, he would end up as having a narcissistic personality disorder.
Right.
Hate me, love me. I'm just saying.
So
He could.
that's different than borderline personality disorder. What's the difference there?
Excellent question. You get a gold star for my student today.
Yeah.
So personality
right on my-
disorders, when we look at them, professionals look at them, there's three clusters. There's cluster A, there's cluster B, and there's cluster C. So cluster B is what dramatic, unpredictable, is personality sorry, I got really excited about the words. Dramatic and unpredictable behavioral patterns are like the main cover letter, if you will, for cluster B personality disorders. Cluster B personality disorders are antisocial, borderline, and narcissistic, and histrionic.
Okay.
So looking at those, there's very dramatic behaviors and there's very unpredictable behaviors within these. So briefly, like antisocial personality disorder, simple explanation, blatant disregard for the rights of others. So if you've ever seen American Psycho, Christian Bale's character in American Psycho would be described as having an antisocial personality disorder. There are many more, but I just picked out some of the best ones that I enjoyed. So that gives an example. For people with like borderline personality disorders, if you've seen the movie Girl Interrupted, and it's coming from like her inside version when she's in the psychiatric hospital. Jennifer Lawrence's character in Silver Linings Playbook had a borderline personality disorder. And a lot of history has shown that Marilyn Monroe probably had borderline personality disorder, just looking at her behaviors throughout her life.
Heard that.
Narcissism, like I just mentioned, and people with a narcissistic personality disorder tend to have no connection to others' feelings. Like, I'm not connected to your emotions in any way, shape, or form. Your emotions do not impact me in any, it doesn't matter. Nothing is getting past what's most important to me, because a lot of individuals with true narcissistic personality disorders, not traits, are very self-centered. And it's all about me, which in turn, I'm never wrong. And because I'm never wrong, there's no reason for me ever to get help for it, because I'm not the one that's ever wrong. So it's really difficult to get a true person with narcissistic personality disorder to actually go to therapy and work through that.
How does shame play a factor in narcissistic personality disorder?
A lot of times they don't feel shame because I'm not doing anything wrong. So I don't have guilt. I don't have shame. I don't have empathy. And a lot of times I definitely don't have sympathy, because that's a you problem for literally everything, even when I'm part of the problem, because I'm not doing anything wrong.
So even when evidence is directly in front of them and that doesn't matter?
No, it will be spun as to be evidence that you're doing something wrong. I'm doing everything right. Okay. There's a great, I wish I could remember his name. There's this great guy on YouTube, a black gentleman, and he describes himself as like a true narcissistic, having this personality disorder. And I wish I remembered why he ended up in therapy, but for whatever reason, maybe to test himself. I don't know. Anyways, but he has a lot of like really good clips, and I think maybe some of them are on TikTok too. Neither here nor there. But he kind of talks about, here's what it looks like. So if you're in a conversation with someone and A, B, and C, and D, this is all happening, you might be dealing with someone with narcissistic personality disorder. Here's how I kind of have learned to overcome some of those things. Here's how I have learned to develop a sense of sympathy for people or empathy for people. I don't know if I haven't watched enough, or the ones I've seen haven't said anything about shame or guilt. But he still took that chance to see if maybe on some level he was part of the problem. He's fantastic. I don't remember his name. So good luck searching for him. Good. Anyways, and another person that history has described with narcissistic personality disorders, like Ted Bundy.
Right.
Ted Bundy never thought that he was wrong in any way, shape, or form. Like, he didn't do anything wrong. No guilt, no shame. I don't care about human life. Like, no, it's about what's best for me and my values and my beliefs. And I'm going to do what I want to do.
Yeah, it was very much but I have to meet my needs. Like,
right. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, but I have to meet my needs. You know, it was just kind of, he was just on repeat on that. Like,
yep, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, and if you look at Donald Trump, like, what better way to showcase the world loving you and adoring you? The world, I say in quotes, because, well, by putting elevating yourself to the highest office in the land, like the ego, the self-righteousness that is there. And I have yet to find any clips where he truly heartfeltly, deeply apologizes for any of the things he's done. Instead, look at all the things I have done to make your lives better. Your lives are better because of me, because of what I've done. And like, I'm not I don't disagree. There's some shit he did. Like, okay, but this isn't about politics, so I'm not going to go there anymore. So that gives like another example. Not that all presidents have narcissistic personality disorder.
No, but I think all presidents have to have some, at least, traits of narcissism in order to be able to take that office. Same as surgeons.
Oh yeah.
Like there's certain jobs that people take where you have to have some of those traits in order to be able to just have the hubris to be able to succeed, because they are so, crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Absolutely.
So,
the other one that falls under cluster B is histrionic. So a lot of times clients with a lot of trauma, the kind of the back and forth is histrionic, borderline, histrionic, borderline. The brief description is like a histrionic personality disorder tends to be the life of the party, attention seeking all the time, very charming and outgoing, need for acceptance, seductive, and overly emotional. Again, if you've had a life of trauma, especially sexual trauma, and now one of your behaviors as an adult acting out is seeking attention, being that life of the party, wanting all of that intimacy and connection because it's filling some need within you. So it can look like histrionic personality disorder. And the best example for that is Michael Scott on The Office. If he was a real person and sat down for psychological evaluation, it would come out most likely that he would have a histrionic personality disorder, which I thought was great because so many of you out there love The Office. I've never seen The Office. Don't judge me.
I saw about half of it and then they took it off of Netflix. I was mad.
Like, I've watched a couple of episodes, but like never dug in.
I like it. Yeah.
So that's like cluster B. Those are the ones that fall under that dramatic and unpredictable kind of umbrella of those personality disorders.
Now, did you give us examples for A?
No, I did not. Look at you. Another gold star for you. I love this so much. So cluster A is defined as like odd and eccentric. So your schizoid personality disorder, your schizotypal personality disorder, and your paranoid personality disorders are going to fall under this. A lot of people will assume that schizoid and schizotypal is just like being schizophrenic. It's not. 3 completely different diagnoses. A person with a schizoid personality disorder is someone that has difficulty maintaining long-term meaningful relationships and can detach themselves from others. So a good example, Christian Grey in 50 Shades of Grey. Like, he cannot connect with others, struggles to do that with others, and keeps himself detached.
That's schizoid.
But you can learn ways to attach. So all of these, you can learn ways to undo some of those behaviors, because ultimately then he ends up with whatever her name is. I don't remember her name. That's neither here nor there. But like, he ends up with her and having like this overly emotional and deep connection with her in a way that like shocks her and pushes her away. But then something about it, obviously alluring, so she comes back. So he learns by engaging with a person that has solid boundaries, that is not willing to sacrifice herself and her happiness for somebody else, how to then have a seemingly normal, quotations, healthy relationship. Schizotypal individuals. So these ones are like living, believing, and fantasizing all the time, literally about everything. So they live inside of their fantasy world all of the time, and they create their fantasy world to the best of their ability. So the best example, especially since the history of him just came out not that long ago, Willy Wonka. Like, total recluse, went in on himself, built this whole candy factory just out of pure fantasy, and everything in there connected in some way, shape, or form to himself and what he believed was most possible. Again, he had a giant ego, but he was able to build that in a way that A, was able to provide people joyousness and candy galore. But then when people tried to infiltrate it, like obviously shut it down, became a recluse, and then reopened it for select people. But he lived inside of that fantasy world.
Good.
The last one under cluster A is paranoid. So exactly what it says. Extremely paranoid about everything all of the time. So it's not that you're necessarily hearing voices or you're seeing things that aren't there that can be associated with schizophrenia, because they are also paranoid. But it's paranoid that when you walk into a room and somebody gets quiet, they have to be talking about me. And now because they're talking about me, now I have to run through this loop in my head of why they're talking about me and where that's coming from and everything else. And then you switch to something else and, oh my God, did you see how that person just looked at me? So it's constantly running. The paranoia is going over and over and over in their head. Perfect example, frickin' Hitler or Stalin. Constantly paranoid in some way, shape, or form that somebody is going to take their lives away from them. I have to control the narrative. I have to murder and genocide this whole group of people because in some way they're going to take away what I need most. So it's crazy when you look at that.
Okay.
That like, oh my gosh, that is mind-blowing.
Right. So that's just paranoid personality disorder. That's what it's called.
Yes, paranoid personality disorder, which is different than like
Paranoid schizophrenia.
Normal paranoia, but like the paranoia that comes with schizophrenia.
Right,
because
right.
You have schizophrenia, and now you're hearing things and seeing things that aren't actually there. And then paranoia comes in because these voices are telling you things versus you're telling yourself things.
Okay.
So it's a break in reality versus how you perceive reality.
Does schizophrenia fall under a different?
No, schizophrenia is not a personality disorder. It's just a mental health disorder that obviously we diagnose and we treat. But again, like for so many of our like disorders, like you can't undo, like you can't fix it and heal it the way you can trauma.
Right.
So some of those, especially breaks in reality, those are really, really difficult to manage. So medication is the best way to manage, and hopefully engaging them in some sort of therapeutic activities as well.
Okay.
Our final cluster today, students, is cluster C. And these are kind of represented under the anxious and fearful umbrella. So this is where our avoidant personality disorder, our dependent personality disorder, and our obsessive compulsive personality disorder come from. Again, very different from obsessive compulsive disorder, obsessive compulsive personality disorder. Some similar traits. One can be addressed to decrease the behaviors because a lot of that, again, comes from trauma.
They should use different terms instead of making them almost identical.
Yes, they really should. They really should. Like make it, I don't know, perfection personality disorder. I don't know. I don't know what they could make it. We'll see what happens in the DSM-10. So under the cluster C, avoidant personality disorder. So it's briefly described avoiding relationships and connecting with people. That's all you're doing your whole life. Because if I do, something terrible is going to happen, so I just don't. And an interesting example of that I found was like Elsa in Frozen.
Okay.
Like she avoided having even though like she loved her sister, even though she loved her parents, even though she had like love for people, I cannot have like this connected relationship with you because if I do, something bad's going to happen. So I have to remain detached and I have to avoid at all costs, which I was like, okay, yeah, I can absolutely see that. I can absolutely see. Dependent personality disorder is an excessive need to rely on others for their needs. So kind of like codependency, like we look to others to fulfill, so we can fulfill their needs, which fills our needs. Dependent personality disorder just like takes it to the next extreme. Excellent example is that movie Single White Female. Like she turned her whole persona into her roommate to become her roommate, to then have what her roommate had, but you're never going to have that.
Dating ourselves there when we talk about some of these films, because I've used that reference before with somebody and they're like, what? Because I was like, they were like single white female crazy. And they did not know, so I shouldn't use the word crazy, but it was a certain example that I was doing. But anyway, not the point. That is quite an old movie, but it strikes, as soon as you said it, I know exactly what you're talking about, where somebody like almost tries to metamorphosize themselves into you.
Yes. Like I need to become you because you are perfect and you're everything that I need in my life. So I'm going to change everything about myself to become you. A codependent person's not going to do that.
No, you're right.
So it's definitely different. And the last one is obsessive compulsive personality disorder. So extensive preoccupation with perfectionism, organization, and control. Which again is not that undifferent, that's not even a word, not that unsimilar. Sure. Then obsessive.
I think it's dissimilar.
Not that dissimilar. There we go. See, I knew you'd find it somewhere for me. Not that dissimilar from obsessive compulsive disorder, like where like constant cleanliness or constant grade perfection or constant working out body perfection or like focusing on something because I have to have control over something in order to feel in control. And if something's out of place and I'm obsessive about where things go, I'm feeling out of control and I can't gain my control back until that thing has found its place. So the personality disorder just takes it to a whole nother level. And again, you tend to isolate and detach. Two great examples was like Jack Nicholson's character in As Good as It Gets. He had the personality disorder. Or if you look at Julia Roberts' husband in the movie Sleeping with the Enemy. Like he was very particular about everything. And if it wasn't like his reaction was so extreme and so violent and so aggressive when something was out of place, where someone that might just have obsessive compulsive disorder just kind of like starts to panic, gets a little anxiety, maybe has a whole panic attack, maybe freaks out a little, and then it's like what moves it back into place, and it's like, okay, I can breathe, it's back where it belongs. Like, I'm okay now. Where with a personality disorder, it's next level.
It's adding in that personality component.
Yes.
That takes it up to the next level of it. So it's like, it's this on steroids.
Oh my God. Yeah. So much. Like, it just, everything is felt deeper. Everything is a part of your core in a completely different way than a disorder would be, because this is all about your personality and how it is developed, and this is how it has to be. And if it's not, then here's the extremes that I can go to.
So is that nature or nurture?
They say both. Like,
okay.
You could simply just be born that way. And typically it won't start to show itself until really early adulthood. Not that you probably won't have some of the behaviors as a young kid, but once you're an adult, and then once you're like giving a chance for you to outgrow some of those behaviors, if you will, and then kind of looking at them. And then some of it could absolutely just be nurture by types of abuses we experience, by things that have happened in our life, by environments that we've been in and raised in and around, by chemicals we've come into contact with. Like, all of that can impact our body and our chemical makeup and how we mature and grow.
Okay. That's all fascinating to me anyway. I don't know if it is to any of our listeners, but I think that it's fascinating that they can look so similar, and in one, you have therapeutic options, and in the other, it's like, I mean, kinda, but also you also have to accept, like, there's medications that you might have to take. There's things that you're going to have to you're going to have to understand this is part of your existence, your makeup, and then learn to navigate around that, or find other people who are willing to do so. And that's only if you're able to be the most self-aware and in tune as you possibly can be, which most of us are not, even on our best days, certainly not those of us who are struggling with any kind of disorder, much less a personality disorder.
Absolutely.
So,
and a lot of them never like seek any help.
Right.
Like, it doesn't happen. Not that there aren't people that don't solely just work in my field, that don't just solely work with personality disorders, because there are. But like, typically a lot of them are not coming into the office and being like, look, I don't know what's wrong with me, help me work through these things, because they have built it around who they are from jump. Like, they have just kind of and so it's not where they can say, okay, I was abused as a kid, and so now I think like I'm antisocial.
It's their existence.
Yes.
More than it is experiences that have happened that have created it. Okay.
Right.
That explains it so much more clearly for me as to why, now looking back, there's no doubt in my mind that borderline personality disorder is something that we could take off the table this far down into my therapy, or even though it's not in those disorders, bipolar disorder or manic depressive,
right.
Those are two things that they talked about, because I used to speak very quickly, and a lot of that had to do with feeling like I need to get all my thoughts out so that I could be heard. That's a trauma response.
Right. Not a manic response.
Correct.
But if you're manic, it would manifest in these other ways, but you still could speak rapidly.
Yes, and that's where learning about the person is vital.
Yes.
Before you choose a treatment plan, much less start prescribing medication.
Absolutely.
So that's where I think we would both, again, advocate that if your provider is not taking the time to learn what you've gone through, as well as who you are and what your things are, that you're there, then have a talk with them, see if they're willing to dig deeper. Maybe they don't know that that's what you're looking for. And if you're not capable of that, or if that's not what they're willing to do, find the person that is.
Yes.
So that you can get the most benefit out of this treatment that you're seeking, because that is how you will heal and grow the fastest. I mean, that's what I certainly found when I finally clicked with Dave. And I'll never forget what David had to do with that one of those first visits. He didn't like the other therapists I'd had before, where either I'd been kind of dismissed or immediately given advice or immediately started to be diagnosed. Dave said, wow, that must have been really hard.
Yeah.
That just sucks. And I like burst into tears. Having that provider to be able to listen to you and grow with you and to get that history and take time, it's going to make all the difference in how you are able to heal through your past traumas. Because that's what we're here to talk about, is although there are all of these disorders, our show focuses on people who've gone through either childhood trauma or trauma later, and how that shaped them and how that may affect your coping skills and your responses to people.
Yes.
And being able to understand that it's not something that you have to live with.
Correct.
But it is something that as much as it's like you didn't break the toy, but you got to fix it.
Yeah.
It's yours. You own it. So you have to take it home. You got to carry it, and you're going to have to carry it around no matter what. So better to fix the toy than to carry around a broken one. Not to negate our feelings down to toys, but I mean,
that's an analogy, because especially if it's your favorite toy,
right?
And equating that to being like, you are your own, like you are the only one of you that exists.
Yeah,
this is your favorite toy. So if your toy is broken, you want to do anything you can to fix it. If you're the only one that exists of you in the entire world, why would you also not want to try to fix that?
And I said that on our page in one of the thoughts of the day. Whatever you believe in that created you felt that you were important enough to create one of you. There will only ever be one of you that has your experiences, your thoughts, your DNA, all of the things that make you up from your past and your present and your future. Yes. And you were important enough to exist. So that matters. And it's something that should be paid attention to and given honor to, regardless of what you feel.
Yes.
You may not feel like you deserve it, or you're entitled to it, or because you were treated a certain way that you deserve different things, or you need to be perfect in order to get those things.
Right.
It's been quite an eye-opening journey for me, and I'm still on it. As you know, I talk to you for advice every once in a while, but I really try and use my tools where I can, and journaling has been, it's hard for me with having Dupuytren's, but journaling has been incredibly beneficial in being able to get those thoughts. Even when I don't think I know what I need to write about, I just start writing. I can start writing like, I don't even know why I'm writing this. I'm just feeling blah, 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 and start going from there. And it could be, I'm just feeling tightness in my chest. I'm just feeling nauseous. I'm just feeling tired. Whatever it is, or it can be more deep than that. I've gotten a little better at the free flow thought ideas coming out to be able to help to pinpoint what it is that I'm reacting to, what's triggering me, so that I can then respond in the way that I want to respond.
Absolutely.
Versus that my trauma brain is like, nope, this is how we do it.
Yeah.
Like, get on the train. We're going to barrel right through this.
Yep.
And it's not the way, folks. It's just not the way, guys.
No.
So it's best to find your professional, find out what is going on with you. And the more you're open, like, it sucks to get any kind of diagnosis of any kind. And labeling is probably better left for when it's needed for medication prescription more than anything else, or, treatment purposes, than it is for in the office. You really don't need to know if you have a personality disorder. You need to treat the symptoms more than anything else.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And unfortunately, because of the way the medical system is set up, when we are billing your insurance companies, we have to give you a diagnosis. It is, I do not agree with it at all. Many people in my field do not agree with it at all, but that, like, ultimately, that's the only way we're going to get paid, because we have to give you a diagnosis. They need to know why you are seeing us.
Right.
It's none of their damn business, but here we are.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm blessed in that with Dave, I private pay. So he doesn't have to diagnose me with anything. And you know, he said before, like, well, I can see some of this, but I don't like to use labels.
Yes.
That's what he just always go back to. I don't like to use labels. And I do like that, but it is important, I think, too, to also be aware, especially if you're around people who may be having some of these behavioral issues or problems, to maybe be aware of, okay, well, is it something that they can't control and it's a personality disorder and maybe they're not able to seek help, or is this something that is more related to their trauma? And even still, like, maybe they're not able to control it, but it might help you better understand and better then inform yourself on your decisions on how you're going to interact with that person, whether you're going to or not have that person in your life, and how much energy you're going to give to them.
Sure.
Knowing what you can get back from them, knowing what they can give from you or give to you based on what they're capable of.
Absolutely.
So I think that's the only place where these labels, you know, because it gives you, when you were listing off, like, this disorder has these, you know, these traits to it. It is helpful then in some ways to know, like, oh, I could think of a couple of people that I was like, oh, that's actually, that makes sense. So and so does this now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, or that I grew up and had this experience with this person. Mm-hmm. They probably had this going on and I didn't even realize it because I was a child, of course. I'm looking forward to listening to the podcast back and hearing and being able to, like, because it's different talking about it than it is sitting and listening to it and taking in information. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to being able to listen to it again and hear it all again and kind of process all of that. I think it might help give me some breath to be able to breathe, because when you grow up around people who are narcissistic or histrionic or anything like that, there tends to be, that's where that codependency can be created, because you're still trying to be good enough to make everything right, and you don't know what happened, what was wrong, and in reality, it had nothing to do with you. Right. It was never you.
Yep.
You know, and just because you created the unhealthy coping skills in order to survive doesn't equate with your value or you, or, you know, in my case, as I change now to, it's not about you. I talk about, it's about me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. So
absolutely.
It's been very helpful. Is there anything else you want to share? Any other characters you want to share with us?
No, that's it. Although there was one thing, because there's like actually like a whole breakdown of like Winnie the Pooh and like all of his characters.
Oh, but yeah. They all have. I've seen that used before as examples of all of the like personality disorders and stuff, and it's quite interesting to see that when they're described that way. You're like, huh, I never thought of that.
Yeah, and you can always like Google like movies that contain or that showcase personality disorders, and there's going to be a ton of them that are going to come up that are that you're like, oh, I've seen that. Oh, okay, that makes sense. Why it's a disorder in this aspect. It's a personality disorder rather than just a disorder. And like being able to see the extreme differences, which I always find fascinating because, well, that's my field. So it's what I do.
I know. And I find it fascinating from my own background, but also just because every time that I get more knowledge, I gain more healing. I gain more opportunity to heal. And so that's the way that I've found that even though it may not pertain to me, it helps me rule things out. It helps me understand things. It helps me understand other people better. It helps me meet them in the moment. It helps me meet them where they're at.
Yes.
Or choose not to recognize and be like, ooh, beeline or wait, we're going to hit the ship and take the train over on this side because I'm not going over there.
Yeah.
That is not the energy I want to entertain.
Absolutely.
you know, but, and it actually, it's funny. There's somebody that is in our town that, very recently I had an interaction with him. He's our township supervisor. And he has, I don't know if he has some personality disorder going on or if he's just got trauma stuff going on or what, but he has a tendency to monopolize conversations and to make it about him, not about just about himself, but to talk about how he is the one who made things happen or was not at fault if something went wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And it will go on and on. And we were downtown, and I wouldn't have been able to do this a few years ago. We were downtown, we'd gone to meet our friend, we were gone to talk, and he walked up to, and I didn't even realize it was him. And I came over with my ice cream, and he's talking about this funeral for a local person that had like a funeral procession through town with a horse-drawn carriage and their coffin driven around town, and everybody could come out and pay their respects and stuff. And there was some problem with the route that the horse took, and I don't even know all the things. He went on, and it was, I had eaten 3/4 of my ice cream, and he's there, and finally I stopped and I said his name, and I said, can we end this conversation, or can we end this topic? How long is this story? And because you have to be very direct with him, I found with him.
Right.
There's no other way to get him to stop. And he just stopped and looked, and normally he would turn on some kind of, and he just stopped and looked at me and like turned and walked the other way. And I said, I didn't say you had to leave. I just wanted to change the topic. I don't know the person he was even talking about. And this was after he'd gotten multiple cues. Like, we're trying to change the topic. We're trying to hang out. Where I'm talking 6, 7. It was interesting to be able to sit back and go, oh, okay, he's not able to do this on his own.
Right.
And I knew I wasn't going to handle it the most gracefully. I just didn't care at the moment. It wasn't somebody that I didn't have the emotional energy to really, I was there to see my friend. I'm sorry. I wasn't rude, but I was just like,
Right.
Can we end this story? Like, this is a really long story.
This is really going on a long time.
10 minutes. Maybe 15, actually. It might have been 15 because I would eat my whole ice cream. But it's, and that's one of those, like, me stepping in and taking back my own personal power and space where I felt comfortable being able to do that so many years. Whether somebody else would have done it the same way doesn't matter.
Right. Right.
So that was my little story about dealing with, I had recognized when we were talking about personality disorders, and I was looking up some of them, and I was like, oh, he's either had some trauma, like there's a need for attention,
Sure.
Something's happened there. He's a very kind man, but there's just something going on there. So I think he'll avoid me for a while.
He probably will.
I'm okay with it.
That's all right. That's all right.
I think I'll be okay. So,
I agree.
anyway, what you got there, Jason? You got any? I saw you taking notes. You got anything you want to impart?
I saw his face, and he's like, oh, all over the place.
I know. You gripped your brow at one point and put your head down.
Couple of things. I feel like if you ever have a week where you're not really sure what you want to talk about, I feel like the influence and the platform of social media and how it ties into all the different kinds of trauma can be its whole episode.
Sure.
And I would like to dial in on that more in depthly.
Absolutely.
What I will say is this, and when I take this file into post-production, as previous episodes have been, I black out my screen. I put your guys' logo on there until, the very end of the show when I give my 2 cents or whatever. And it's probably a good thing that I do this because while you guys are talking, specifically when you were talking about the borderline personality, disorder and the definition and the examples and all this shit, that diagnosis has been at the forefront of my brain for the last 3 years. And the reason why that is because on full display in real time, examples are happening on my phone from that individual as you're fucking talking about it. And I wish I was any less of a professional, that I would have pulled this shit onto the screen, be like, this is happening in real time. Look at this shit in real time.
Right.
But I won't. I don't have to. Because somebody is going to take that clip, I have no doubt, and they're going to send it to her. This is what, and I have tried to have this conversation because at that time I cared. Now it's a different story, but then I did. This is what is happening because I went and did my own research on this because I was that invested, that dialed in. This is what I have come up with based on what you are giving me. Based on your actions, your words, how you conduct yourself. This is what it leads to. And I was told a number of things, but the bottom line was I was wrong. And I didn't know what I was talking about. Well, here we are, weeks, months, years later, and you are solidifying and confirming what my individual research brought me to. Mm-hmm. This is what you are. This is why you need help, not from me, but you need to go speak to a professional. I have put you on a path that tells you I've done the legwork for you. You go to somebody who's reputable and you tell them, I have been told I am this.
Right.
Can you expand on that?
Yeah.
And if it's a professional, they will. You know what I'm saying? So it was very ironic. And I'm a fan of irony. Like, I appreciate it, and I recognize it as it happened. And everything was confirmed, and it maintains my inner peace of how I'm dealing with this situation, how I have dealt with it, and what I'm going to do with it moving forward. Unfortunately for that individual, their presence in my life is now null and void, and it's unfortunate. But I know myself well enough. When I'm done, I'm done. You know what I mean? And a lot of the reactionary process of how they conduct themselves hurled onto me has made me decide this is not what I want to be a part of. Mm-hmm. This you are destroying aspects of my internal peace, and I will not have that for any stretch of the imagination. And for me, anybody who knows me on any personal level knows when I utter the words, I'm done, that's it. There is no more room. There is no more conversation. There is no more negotiating. There is nothing. I have given you all my time, effort, and energy that I possibly can, and you've exhausted it. And now I'm moving on. And that's just, whether that's right or wrong, it's, that's individualized, but that's how I maintain my inner peace. So I just wanted to acknowledge that while you were describing this, I'm like, there's a box. That box is checked. That's happening right in front of me. You know what I mean? Yeah. So yeah, I chuckled for sure. Another great episode though, by the way, I don't mind telling you.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else?
No.
No, I think, I think that we're going to be coming up on where we're going to be taking a break here now pretty quick, right, Natalie?
Yes, so that we can work on season 2.
Yep. So when is our last episode schedule? Is this it?
No, this is number 16.
Yeah, we still have 20.
We will stop after 20, which will happen the week of the 19th of August is when we record that one.
And then we're going to take a how long break? An 8-week break?
It's about 5-ish
Oh.
weeks. Yeah, come back like the 1st of October.
Yeah, because
season 2 dialed in.
which works perfectly because I will be gone for my 50th, and so that will be that will make things a little easier. And then we will come back with season 2. What we would love is if any of our listeners have any podcast requests, any topics that they want to hear about, anything you want us to delve deeper into, anything like that. We've kind of done the clinical side of it, and now we wanted to get into more of the living with it, how it's affected you, your family, your friends, the back side of it, and what it's like to heal from it, and what that looks like on a personal level, not so much the clinical level. And so if people have any requests or suggestions, we would love to hear it.
Absolutely. That would be fantastic.
Yeah. So
you can send all of your ideas and suggestions over to the We Don't Talk About That Facebook page, or you can go to pfcnetwork.net. They have the links in there as well. The timing of it could not be more perfect with the launch of season 2, because it's going to coincide with the launch of our streaming app. So we can really incorporate the season premiere of your show as part of the launch of the app. So one will tie into the other. So that actually works itself out pretty brilliantly, actually. I love when the stars align, organically. So
yes. Yeah.
Well, I've gotten several gold stars here today. So, I mean,
yes, you have gold star, gold star, gold star.
There, you got one more there for you. All right, with that, we certainly appreciate everybody tuning in this week. Go over to the online store, pfcstore.printify.me. Show support for the ladies who put in their all for you with each and every episode. All kinds of great merchandise with the logos and designs of all the great shows here under our umbrella. With that, go out, be awesome to yourselves and to each other, and we'll see you next time right here on Shh, We Don't Talk About That on the PFC Entertainment Network.